Hi, this is Paul, and John and I just finished recording a video that maybe it'll be titled something like, So you went to a conference and you want to start an estuary, where John, the typical, rain cloud on all our hopes, says, It's so hard to start. Don't have your expectations too high. No, join
Different.
LSNet, get some support, get some training, get a friend, get a buddy to do it with you, and definitely start your estuary. Now, this video is going to be about conferences because I was just thinking this morning that I wanted to do a video about conferences and John, you know, can we can talk about that back and forth. The conference thing sort of developed naturally in a lot of ways out of the TLC experience, this little corner of the internet. People have been watching my channel, been watching Peugeot, Peterson, Vervaeke, sort of part of this meaning crisis conversation. And Jeff P. at the conference talked about the fact that he got together with Job in Texas when Job was there. There was a fishing trip that they didn't actually do any fishing, I don't think, but Jacob Federecci and a bunch of others, I think Sam Tiedemann and Luke Thompson or other, I don't know who all was there. I wasn't there. And then we had the big event, which was the Thunder Bay event, Consciousness and Conscience, that happened in September of 2022. What's that, John?
Doesn't the festival in Europe predate
The
the
festival
Thunder
pre
Bay experience,
the festival in Europe predates the Thunder Bay experience, and
to
so
which we were both invited, and it was intended to be an introduction of Estuary to the wider community? That
that's right.
they had already begun to use the protocol, and they had started a few groups, and it was those few groups that put together this festival to which we were invited, which gave us the opportunity to introduce Estuary to a whole bunch of more people in Europe, because we did it in Holland, we did it in London, we did it in Northern Ireland, and we had an amazing time together. Loved those adventures. It was so cool.
John and I had adventures. Yes, we
Yeah.
did.
But then
Yes,
I
we
was
did.
tired because I'm old and you still had some energy left. And this thing in Thunder Bay had been planned for a long, long time without any reference to estuary.
Yep.
But the critical part was that you and John and Jonathan got together with another person. I don't remember his name anymore, but that was where the team, the Three Musketeers, first got together, and that in the end turned out to be a really successful thing.
Right.
Your turn.
But that wasn't so much of an estuary retreat.
Nope.
And then
And then you
but
came home, and I know what happened.
well, you can tell the story.
Paul comes home from Thunder Bay, all enthusiastic, and he shows up in Southern California. He says, John, I have found the magic formula.
I did not say that.
Yes, you did. He said, this is how it's going to be. I can still hear you say it. You said, so you get these little local estuaries that get together and organize events, and then they get some big speakers, and they attract more people, and then the additional people are introduced to estuary, and more estuaries are formed, and then those estuaries organize conferences, and the whole thing kind of becomes to feed off of itself in a symbiotic relationship. And then came the magic words. I remember you saying, because I have heard you whine on and on and on. You can tell people what to do, they'll never do it. You can tell people what to do, but they'll never do it. And guess what you said? John, you are next.
I did say that. I did say
Remember that? Remember that?
that. Yes.
And then I was really scared out of my wits because I've never organized any conference at all, and I had no idea how to do it. But I had a real clear sense that what happened in Thunder Bay was important, and you did it right, and it was beautiful. And so I said to Paul, I said, Paul, can you get the three henchmen together? Yes, he said. And you made a few phone calls, and they decided to commit to this thing. And then I called Catherine Wilson and said, hey, Catherine, can you come too and be the moderator like you were in Thunder Bay? And she says, yes, I'll be there. So now I have my whole programming, my speaker list, and the moderator organized. I go to the people in my church, and they were so pleased that I asked, because there's a couple of people in there that live for this whole conference thing. They love to organize it. They love to do the feeding of the people and the room assignments and the name tags and all that stuff. And And I was so pleased that I asked him because I could just completely sit back and watch it all happen. And so I have very little. I can make very little. Give myself very little credit for Estuary Chino 2023, but it was a lovely time, and we, the same speaker showed up as in Thunder Bay, and we had a few other add-ons. That was the repeat of Paintball for Jesus that the Grimm organized, and we had a successful time doing that. And then we also went to visit the St. Andrews under the guidance of Jonathan Pajot, and had some buses lined up. Man, we had fun. I just love doing it, and it'll be a while before I do it again.
But you also innovated, because that's where we really began to apply sort of the estuary protocol and the dynamics of the estuary group. Not quite as so. So you had this idea of before we have any plenary sessions with the celebrities on the stage or anything like that, we need to get people into little groups first. And I remember you
Yep.
telling me that idea, and I was like, boy, I don't know. I've never heard a conference do that before. And the thing was, it was a great idea. It was a great idea. And then
Worked well, didn't it?
after it happened, I thought, oh, this is just a no-brainer, because first thing that happens when you go to college is they put you all in these little orientation groups. Because if you go to college and nobody in your friend group went to that college, you're going to be there all sad and lonely, and maybe you're an introvert, so you're afraid to talk to people. Put people in that little orientation group, and within the first couple days there, you've got some friends who also don't have anybody there. And so even though at Chino we really sort of
It's a little
didn't,
artificial. It was a little awkward.
yeah, we
They
didn't
did
we
it
didn't
better here. Yeah,
we
and
didn't
then
quite have it together,
right.
but that happened. And so Chino was a big success. And but we really didn't have sort of the rhythm between the big stage meeting and the little estuary group. And I think the breakthrough conference where they really worked that well was one that you didn't get a chance to go to, which was in Olympia, Washington,
Yep,
that Nate
I've heard all
Heil
about that.
spearheaded.
Yep,
And they really emphasized the we had, it wasn't as big a conference. We had about 100 people. We had four or five, six stage people. Nobody quite of the as famous as Jonathan Pajot or John Vervaeke. But we also had people that were sort of already kind of connected into our conversations. A lot of people. Nate had organized that conference, so he had picked a lot of people that are sort of in Grail countries orbit. For those of you who don't know, Grail country is one of the channels that's part of this little flotilla of channels that makes
yep,
up the TLC.
yep.
So it was a fairly Grail country specific group, very Pacific Northwest. But what caught my attention from that conference was how powerful the the repetition of meeting back together with the same group, going to the big group, meeting back together with the same group. Those Some powerful things happened on stage. There are recordings of the stage events out on my channel and on Grail Country's channel. But of course, nothing in the little groups is recorded. And that was tremendously powerful. And that's where I saw that you can do a conference where there's sort of both and. And it's also the
Interface.
case. That's right. And it's also the case that I had run a retreat that my sister has kind of sort of a historic farmhouse, used to be kind of a tavern. It's got an interesting history in Thompson, Connecticut. There's a barn attached to it. And so I ran the first time I just done conversations. This was way back before COVID. And for this one, I decided I was going to run the estuary protocol. And we started on a Thursday afternoon and went to a Saturday afternoon. And about the only prep work I did for that conference was I had the estuary protocol. And we started with this group, 12 people signed up. We limited it to be small. And basically, we just sort of, we'd have a session, then we'd take a break, we'd eat together, hang out together, then do another session. And so we just did that. And again, the effect of running session and then session and session and session, especially in sort of a limited period of time, especially when there's a little bit more living together and eating together, that was profoundly powerful. And so, and Breakwater in Europe has been playing with smaller gatherings too. And so, over time, we've really begun to discover kind of how different size gatherings and conferences can produce something. And, part of the benefit early on in 2019, when my channel started to grow, there was a fair amount of clamor and pressure for me to start something centralized where we would be centrally planning these things. And I'm so glad that we didn't, because number one, I don't know that anything would have happened. And number two, everyone who sort of does their own conference has added something to the mix. They've either
Very much so.
refined something or
Yep.
innovated something. And it doesn't mean that everything always sort of works, but we as sort of a broader community have been learning about this. And what it's also meant is that we've had way more conferences than we could have centrally planned and sort of, had the human resources to do. And so there's a South Estuary conference coming up in October. There's another Breakwater event coming up in November in the Netherlands. And I'm already starting to hear rumblings of other conferences.
But about that central feature, what was in the most well? So your comment about there will be no central control of conferences. When the ELC committee, I'm trying to get rid of some of my tasks and responsibilities, and there's a group of 7 people that are kind of picking up the slack, and they want to take over the ELSNet leadership training. They want to maintain the website, maintain the database for all the different groups, and be helpful and useful in that way. But Nate Heil, being the quintessential estuary consult or conference consultant who can get big name people on the stage and can make things happen, and he cooks an amazing barbecue. He has kind of been appointed and pushed forward as the liaison between the group of people that has gathered the ELC Estuary Leadership Council. He is their rep of conference planning, and he has been extremely helpful both in Chicago and also again in Southwest Estuary. But the other thing
South
that we were
Estuary.
oh yeah
Northwest Estuary, Southeast
Northwest Estuary,
Estuary.
Southeast Estuary. This is
Yeah,
confusing.
I know. It's going to be a
Yeah.
mouthful.
Yep. Wait till you hear the New York people. They start talking about something in 2028, and they need to come up with some kind of a name. I wonder how that's going to go. However, be that as it may, the other thing that can be provided centrally through Elspeth and the estuaryhub.com is qualified leaders for every conference. And in this particular situation, we were able to work seamlessly together with the organizers of Chicago, of Midwest Estuary, to be able to have all the leaders available. They didn't all come from ELSNet, but the vast majority of them were recruited through our ELSNet database, and all the people that were already planning to come and were encouraged to come and say, hey, here's an opportunity to practice your skill set for estuary leadership. That is, I think, one of the beautiful ways in which we can make a contribution to individual conferences as they are being planned. That when people say, hey, where are we going to find all the leaders for our small groups, for our breakout groups, for our estuary groups? Well, go to ELSNet and have us provide them for you.
Yep.
And we like to continue doing that because it is a lovely experience to gather a bunch of people together and have them discover in real life what an estuary group is like. And so, yeah, we like to do that.
And, Dave W., who was the Chad keeps saying it was Grizz. I don't know what happened between Grizz and Chad, but in terms of the genesis of the Midwestuary, but I know that Chad contacted me and I encouraged him to talk to the Chicago meetup. And of course, I knew that there was a ton of horsepower in that Chicago meetup,
Yep.
that they could really pull something like this off, and they really did. So much of this has to do with connections and networking. Part of the reason we've had an easier time of this in the United States and Canada is that, often we have connections to
Networks.
facilities
Yep, yep,
and
yep.
networks. And so, you know, Chino, Olympia, and Chicago have all been in Christian Reformed churches, and
Yeah, go figure.
just by virtue of my networks
Yep,
and you know that can go. Um, but like Dave W. in North Carolina, where there is no Christian Reformed church, has managed to pull this off, and he's worked a lot with Nate, and Nate and Jess um, sort of have a template in terms of a website and how to do this. And so even if you don't have the skills or you don't know what to do, but you have an inkling, I would definitely say find Nate Heil and talk to him about, what this involves. Now, another part of the decentralization, I mean, in the last video we talked about, it might not be so easy to just get a group going. Anyone who sort of steps up and says, I want to do a conference, well, there's risk involved.
yep,
And anybody who organizes a conference, you better sort of figure out what's my break even point in terms of all of my costs and, ticket sales and all of that. And every time I've seen someone do a conference, everybody's a little nervous until they get past that break even point, and then whoosh,
yeah.
I'm not gonna go into debt.
Hold the bag.
I'm not gonna go into debt doing this conference. So
Right.
but I think there's also a lot of room for creativity in kinds of gathering. So Grim Grizz, for example, has been talking about campouts and campfires for estuary
He
gatherings.
did that in Chino at Anachino, and he
Right.
did that very well. And I was greatly appreciated. There were probably 40 people there that were at the campsite at one time or another.
So there's and then I think too, these retreats that I've done, I've been thinking about Living Stones. Living Stones might not be in a position now to bring in big speakers, but if I did basically an estuary weekend of 12 to 24 people, let's say, because I could easily handle 24 people, three different groups. And then so there's, but there's a lot of space for creativity. And the thing that's nice about the smaller events, like the event that I did at my sister's place in Connecticut, you really get a chance to get to know people if you have a group of 12 and you're together for 2 days and
Yeah,
you do like one, two, three, four, five, six or seven rounds of the estuary protocol because they sort of build on each other as you go.
yeah,
And just as, Dale Zylstra and I both recommend, if you can do every week estuary, your group will go deeper faster. Because there's something to that, churches have long known, there's something to that 7 day rhythm that I've seen studies on this. It's like memory falls off after 7 days in terms of what you did last. So there's something to that 7 day rhythm. So, if there's ideas out there of I can't do an estuary conference, but I'd like to do an estuary weekend retreat with a group between, let's say, 12 and 24 or 36. I was
you have
talking to my,
several leaders. You have several leaders within your own
yeah,
sphere. I mean, I'd be happy to show up and help, but you got a few other people. I don't know if they want to be named at this point. I don't want to commit them to anything, but you have people available in your neck of the woods who can run a group very well.
that's right. And we've now got leaders sort of sprinkled all over the country and the world who can do these kinds of things. And I also, one of the things I told the Europeans is that, well, I talked to Skankenstein, some of you who know who I'm talking about. He's in the TLC. He said, yeah, if you did something at Living Stones, let's say, and then you could follow it up with, let's say, a trip to Yosemite. So, and then I was talking to my wife who had done a field trip with her class in Yosemite, and it's like can even do one of these things in Yosemite if he can figure out what the meals and the lodging and the meeting space depending on the weather would require. It'd be awesome to do it in the Yosemite Valley.
Okay, what you just did with was provide me with the perfect segue to another piece of the puzzle, and that is venues. We have already said, you and I, in this video, that three major conferences were held in three major Christian Reformed Church settings. So, shout out to the three Christian Reformed churches that saw the vision. And so, other Christian Reformed churches in other places might well consider two things. One, maybe they want to be a location for a conference. Let that Minneapolis crowd up there be able to catch somebody in the Christian Reformed tradition. I think that our people can do this. We are hosts. We know how to practice hospitality. And then in addition to that, I would also say, back to our previous video, that it might not hurt a Christian Reformed church, even if they don't want to do the estuary thing. Make your facilities available for someone to do it. To say, hey, put yourself on a list. I think we're going to make that part of the website when we redo it, that venues can list themselves, and then people can simply go there and then organize their group there. And so in that way. But the other thing is that exactly what you just said, it doesn't have to be a Christian Reformed church. It could be Yosemite. It could be some other really creative campsite. It could be Grim Grizz's backyard in Oklahoma.
I'd go there. I'd definitely go there.
Well, we are creating different experiences that are embodied, that are this is where real life happens, is on the ground. And maybe we can find places and associate it with a fishing trip, or associate it with a hike to a beautiful place like in Yosemite, or we can do it associated with a beach event somewhere in San Diego. There are so many possibilities for different kinds of events to attract their own unique crowd. And then the common denominator among them all would be that somebody is going to introduce the people who attend to an estuary-like experience using the estuary protocol, in which you can learn that, hey, this is a beautiful place, but we're also surrounded by beautiful people, and they have beautiful minds, and let's hear their beautiful thoughts. And sometimes the thoughts are not going to be all that beautiful, but they're going to be painful, and we're going to, shed a few tears together. And I think it's a super great idea, and all venues are welcome. Yeah. All venues are welcome.
Well, and and one of the things that we did at Olympia, Rafe Kelly, we went out and touched grass. And I think you're right in that you can do something like this in conjunction with a fishing trip or a hiking trip, or now obviously
the Harvest Hay in Regina, Saskatchewan.
Obviously, if you make things too strenuous, you're going to sort of select people who are into that kind of thing. Couch potatoes can more easily go in a church and sit around and listen to people talk. But there are a lot of different opportunities for or thinking about this. And, I don't, at this point.
You use the word couch potatoes. I wonder if Rod would welcome us into the Village Church in Tucson, which is all made up of couches.
I would love to do an estuary event at the Village in Tucson.
We did it already. I mean,
we had a meetup thing, but we didn't have our act together then. We didn't have the estuary protocol. We hadn't had all of this experience.
Nope.
Estuary would just go at the Village.
Yep.
Just given who they are. Oh, Rod definitely has to do one. Now, at this point, because of Living Stones, I have like 4 weeks a year 4 weekends a year. I told the pastor in Chicago that if he plans an estuary kickoff midweek, I could probably, just because Chicago's so easy to get in and get out, I could probably get in and get out. I would likely need some, I don't have unlimited funds or frequent flyer miles to fly everywhere in the world all the time. So if you want me to come or other people to come, you probably have to budget in some kind of thing. But, airfare in the United States and lodging, not prohibitively expensive often. So there's a lot of room for creativity in this. And I would love to see, they called it Nestuary in terms of the campground thing, or Grim Grizzle's talking about. Find an Airbnb. Now they're usually a little bit smaller, but maybe find a couple of them and then a venue or something. So you need very little to do this, and it can be connected with all kinds of other cool things too. So it's yeah, and I
Now,
just
now I
encourage.
do I do think that it is important to point out at this point that you are now making a clear distinction between those gatherings that gather for the sake of doing estuary and those events where people gather because they are coming to see their favorite major speaker. So you're attracting a different audience.
Yeah,
So for the smaller events, it is mostly going to be people who already are familiar with estuary.
yeah,
For the bigger events, they could serve as a way to introduce a wider audience and a bigger demographic to the estuary idea
yeah.
by virtue of, we're just going to use you big shots as bait, more or less. I didn't want to say that to John Vervaeke or Jonathan Pajot that they were, they served as well as bait for our estuary project, but that's really what I was thinking.
Well, you can, and you don't have to, because Peugeot and Vervaeke are getting harder and harder to land because they've got plenty of their own projects and their own things.
Yeah.
You can use other speakers.
It turns
Um,
out that Rod Dreher was kind of impressed with the thing.
yeah, he wrote quite a piece about it. So, but you can use other speakers and you can do it. I mean, there's so many different ways that you can use this, or even maybe you already have an event that you're using, but often with events, they'll have like these little breakout groups. But in my experience, what they give the breakout groups to do is usually not terribly
Substandard.
helpful.
No,
So
no, no.
discuss the what the speaker just said. Well, okay. And I found
Maybe
that
we
the
could market it that way. Big conferences that need content for their breakout rooms. We can provide it for a fee. We'll even provide a few leaders if you pay their way.
because the estuary protocol is so mysterious that and it's so difficult and Byzantine to learn
I
that
know, but
someone who can't figure out introductions, pitch, play, pitch, point, play.
I know.
Yeah, we're going to
I
license this. Anybody around the country who uses pitch, point, play, you'll be hearing from our lawyers.
Yeah, no, but still though, I mean, I think that it is being introduced in various commercial settings like the military and businesses. There
Yeah,
are some examples of that, and then now churches that are using it in house.
yeah,
So that is not to say that we couldn't actually provide a service with both the protocol as such and provide the leaders for the breakout sessions to
yeah.
be able to execute that plan in a halfway responsible manner so that people in that put on the conference can feel good about offering that to their people.
We
I
we
never thought
should
about that. That's a good idea.
we should make it known that there's no cost to participate in LSNet.
Correct.
And if you want to get someone that you don't know out, you're probably going to have to,
Flying.
help pay costs,
Yep.
and some of those things. And obviously, depending on if that's a person's livelihood, there might be some kind of fee involved. But for the most part,
I'm retired. I'm one of the cheapest people out there.
John is one of the cheapest people out there. That's true. So I do want people to encourage people to be creative. If you want to use this. And again, what I love about this is so often you go to a conference and be like, well, they had, they keep trotting Vanderklay out for these things. Aren't you tired of that guy? Why don't you do a conference without Vanderklay? And then everybody will come because they don't have to tolerate his annoyances. But yeah, if you were like, I'd love to bring in this speaker and this speaker, and you know, and then I'd love to, have us all sort of chew on that. And I think another one of the things that the Chicago, the Midwest jury did well was, it was so funny because long ago, Chad was like, "Can you come?" I said, "Yes." So then so then Sam sends me this. Well, here's the speaker's contract. And it's like, what? I've spoken many times in places all over the world. I've never had a contract. And so of course, they've got one of their group is a lawyer who specializes in this stuff. And talk to the Midwest jury people because I don't think they paid full advantage of that. But, if in fact you're paying speakers fees, which that makes sense, then to draw up a contract, put into that contract, with this contract, you're expected to do, let's say, 2 videos of, maybe participating in conversation to promote. Because if you decide you're gonna sort of go to the higher cost conference level, where you're going to have speakers, some of whom may, just because that's their livelihood, look for expenses, speaker fees, these kinds of things. If they need a speaker fee, it's well within your rights to have a contract and put in that contract a certain
Some
amount of
expectations. Yeah.
some expectations. And
Yeah.
it's when Midwest Jury started, we had a little conversation backstage about, will the speakers participate in the estuary groups? Now, they didn't compel us to. I very much wanted to. I couldn't make the first session of groups just because that started out right away, and the speakers had some things that they had to do to sort of get organized, and I was meeting a lot of people and some of that. But and some speakers, how can I say this diplomatically? Some speakers like the sound of their own voice, and they might be have a difficult time in an estuary group. And some speakers, and this was brought out when we were talking about it before the conference. It's also the experience of some speakers that their participation in a group can
Messes
warp
it
the
up
group,
big time.
and
Yeah.
and that's a reality too. So conference planners might want to pay attention to that. And again, that's sort of why I like smaller conferences, because there is this effect that when you see people on YouTube, it sort of sets up a subtle psychological dynamic of being starstruck when you meet the people. What's nice about, let's say, seeing that person in a small group is that the that goes away. And then, Paul is just Paul, or Rod Dreher is just Rod Dreher. And then, they're no longer sort of the celebrity on the stage, but they're a normal human being. And you can then have some of the give and take, which I think people very much want. So there's so many ways to play with this thing. And we'll see what happens. I put out that video about living stones. We'll see what happens terms of my career before retirement, but then even after retirement, when probably I'll have a little bit more freedom to my schedule. But there are so many things you could do with this, so many
Yeah.
ways you can work this.
Yes.
And the thing that I love about a decentralized approach, you all are going to have great ideas that John and
We haven't even
we
thought
can't,
about yet.
we haven't even thought about. And then
No.
once it happens, then it gets into the community. And then at a larger scale, we become a learning community and we continue to grow. Now, again, there's risks involved. If you take on the responsibility of planning, there's some financial risks involved, and there's no big pile of money that's a backstop for you. So if you decide you want to have 1,000 persons meet together at USC in Los Angeles,
See,
and,
Jacob.
and I was mention any names, and because all of our conference organizers have been planning too small. If you want to have the first 1,000 person estuary conference, go for it. But USC will be, you might
There will be
suffer
more contracts.
there'll definitely be more contracts.
Even the
Sorry.
caterers will want you to sign the contract.
That's right. There are no Christian Reformed churches that can really hold 1,000 people conference with estuary breakout space. And that's the key.
I was married in the church closest to USC, the Christian Reformed Church closest to USC, first LA, CRC. And no, that church cannot handle 1,000 people.
But I think one of the things that, I mean, if I started getting more invitations, I already have more invitations than I can fulfill. But if I started getting a lot of invitations, I would prioritize events that take seriously the small group estuary meetings
Yeah,
over events that just have a big stage and they want to gather a lot of people and they come in and they listen to them yak and then they go out. Because, and I said this many times at the Midwestuary, what happens on stage is great. It's fun. It's wonderful. I love all the speakers. What I care about when I go to that conference and I sit down with that group of 8 to 10 people in that room, real people with real stories, that's what I truly value
totally.
because
Yeah.
the stories are unfiltered. They're honest, and the work there in that group is amazing. And even though I can't know what's in 35 groups because there aren't 35 of me, it's still better to know what's in one group and the real people in
And
that one
now
group.
too, because I can assure you that my experience was amazing also.
Yeah.
So, and I got
So,
a lot of feedback from other leaders that their groups went well and they had meaningful connection. And so I think that the word about that will continue to spread. And we're seeing an amazing influx on estuaryhub.com. People are signing up. People are inquiring. I think that our count is up 1,600% or something like that.
good.
Our hit number of hits on the site.
You probably have a little flood of estuary, ElseNet people that
Yep.
want to start getting into this. So, yeah. So the conferences have, there's retreats, there's the conferences, the bigger than just your local regular estuary meeting. That level is an important part of the ecosystem. And there's tremendous opportunity for creativity. So, hey, think about something, plan it. Connect with how can people get in touch with I mean, Nate's usually pretty free. You can go to Grail Country and find Nate.
Yep.
Um,
And
if not, contact me and I can put you in touch with him.
yeah, or me for that matter. I mean, but yeah, you're perfectly qualified. Thank you.
So, yep.
Talk to
Anything else
Paul.
about conferences, John?
No, I totally agree with you. They are an integral part of the ecosystem that we're building, and in the same way that the different pieces of the estuary are always shifting and changing, but they are fertile soil for amazing things and weird creatures to grow. So I
All
love it.
right. Very good.
Thanks, Paul.
All right, John.